Welcome to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat Podcast, a platform that features professionals across a variety of industries and promotes growth mindset principles with a central pillar of championing the achievements of women. Our conversations explore a wide spectrum of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, creating a vibrant mosaic that enriches our collective understanding and strengthens our commitment to growth and empowerment.
Today, Ashley Chung, our founder of Virtual Patent Gateway, is speaking with Bijan Khaghani, Crystal Kang, and Theo Ennis, three Gen Z paralegals currently working on the team at Groombridge, Baughman, and Stone as a step in their journey toward a degree in law. In this conversation, they explore shared experiences, growth in the legal profession, and the value of networking and mentorship in their careers. Let's get started.
Thank you so much for being here today. If you don't remember, the last time when we actually chat, it was October 3rd, 2024. So before I met you guys and talk about this particular virtual water cooler chat episode, I took, I think, maybe 15 minutes before we met and look at all of your LinkedIn profiles. And I think we talked about that a little bit. So now we're in 2025. Let's get started. I think that this particular episode is going to be very interesting because you all are Gen Z paralegals. I don't want to overly stereotype, but in terms of like the generation, just even like this, I was like, no, don't make me make any changes. I'm not comfortable with it. So I love the fact that Crystal was like, if you could give us like 10 minutes, we will troubleshoot and everything. That's honestly how my team, the Gen Z, actually dragged me out of my comfort zone. So I think we are going to have some very interesting discussion when we have to do like the YouTube shorts. I literally tell them, I was like, no, I'm comfortable with landscape, not portrait. I don't know how you guys are going to do this. So eventually we went to Barnes & Noble, sat there, and I made them do that in front of me. So after I look at it, I was like, okay, it sounds good. So now we have a bunch of YouTube shorts, which we will have you guys on at some point too. With that, tell us who you are and why you sat to this podcast. Let's start with Crystal.
So, existential question we're starting with, who I am. I will start with saying that my name is Crystal. I am 24. I grew up in New York, and I'm happy to finally call myself in New York because I live in the city proper. And currently, I'm a paralegal at Groombridge, Baughman, and Stone. I'm brought here today because I met you, Ashley, and being so wonderful and so kind and open. It was great to meet you in the New York office. And because of Bijan, we're now here today, all speaking with you through this podcast. I'm just excited to be able to talk to and hopefully reach an audience that is maybe like me or who can relate to my experiences as somebody who didn't really have a lot of attorneys in their family and is just starting out. Not entirely sure what I'm doing all the time, but I'm learning a little bit more each day.
Love it. I'm going to make Bijan wait. So Theo next.
My name's Theo. I'm 23. I'm from San Francisco. I guess I can also call myself a New Yorker. I live in Brooklyn. I've been working here just under a year, I think 10 months at this point. Yeah. Why I'm here, you invited us. I think you invited Bijan, or did Bijan invite himself onto this show?
Bijan likes to invite everybody. If he has it, this whole conference room will be filled.
I know you've interviewed some of our bosses and you've got a ton of industry experience, so I was excited to talk to you about that.
Well, when I started, it's only really to practice my English and public speaking. So now 64 episodes later, and people thought that this is my main gig. I'm like, no, this is my side hustle. So they thought my bread and butter is actually my side hustle. I'm like, no, that's not the case. So Bijan, I know that you've been dying to tell us who you are and why you said yes and dragged all your colleagues onto this particular episode. So do share.
Oh, Ashley, you know immediately that I love to introduce myself every time. But hi, my name is Bijan Khaghani. I won't say that I'm a New Yorker. I've only been here a year. I was born in Chicago, Illinois. I'm 24 years old. I'm also a paralegal here at Groombridge, Baughman, and Stone. And the reason why I kind of said said yes to this was, one, Ashley, you're our friend. As much as like we've seen the episodes of like our different bosses being on here, it's also when you came into the office, I remember the first thing you said, and you pointed at me. You were like, you're the guy from LinkedIn. And I was terrified because no one has addressed me as that ever. And it was so nice that you came into our office, you invited us, and we like walked around. And one of the biggest things is that when you reached out to me, I was like, I would love to be on this podcast. But at the same time, I think that spreading opportunity is one of the most important things we can do. And so I'm happy to have Theo and Crystal here. And I'd be happy to have anybody here. But these two, I'm telling you right now, I'm a very hyper, very like, I'm gonna be like, yeah, like amazing person. These two have wisdom beyond their years. And I'm very excited for them to show it.
That's awesome. Thank you. Do you mind sharing how you got into IP? I know that only Crystal has a STEM degree here. So how did you each get into IP at Groombridge School?
Essentially, I came here first among the three of us. That was about a year and a half ago. And the way that I found IP law was I really knew that I wanted to go into law in general. But I realized two things at my senior year of college. One, similar to Crystal, I didn't have a lot of a background in law. I didn't know a lot of lawyers growing up. So I didn't have anyone to base on what that profession would be. Going into law school blind is one of the worst things I think you can do. And the second thing is that I knew that I wanted to go into law, but I knew what I wanted, but I needed to see the other side of it to know that this was a career for me. And so patent law was the opposite of what I wanted to do. And it's taught me a crazy amount of lessons. I think one of my favorite things is talking about bargains. The fact that lawyers can debate a single word for hours is one of my favorite things of all time, and getting to see one in person is something that this firm has given me, and I'm forever thankful for it.
And it is really quite amazing how many slides they could pack into a Baughman tutorial.
Oh my God, the fact that they can get through all of those slides too. I think there was a story once that Nick Groombridge had like an internal timer of he had 200 slides to go through, and then suddenly like was able to, in his mind, figure out, it's like, okay, I've spent too much time here, I'm gonna go here. I don't know if that's fully the exact numbers on that, but I have heard that story before, and to have that knowledge is crazy.
I came to the firm with a background in science. I was a physics major when I was in college, but I also worked at a different firm before coming here. So in my previous role, I was primarily in operations, and I spread myself thin by dipping my toes into all different types of cases throughout litigation, and I helped with filing court papers. So that helped me get a very broad sense of what the field could be like, what it meant to communicate across large teams, hybrid teams especially. And I think I got a flavor or a sense for how the law operates in litigation, but I wanted to really dive into a field because I knew that eventually I would have to choose a practice area. And actually, it was the encouragement of the department I was a part of that said that, you should really reach out to the patent folks. Like, they seem wonderful. They're always like really smart. They're on top of their game, and you have a science background. Why not take advantage of it? So I spoke with two current partners at this firm and had lunch with Jennifer Wu and Jenny Wu, not related, by the way, but they were so wonderful, so generous with their time, and I could really tell that they were satisfied with the work they were doing. They were happy. I don't know if I could say the same with all the attorneys that I tried to meet and get a sense for what work they were doing. And so I think their energy above everything gravitated me towards the firm, and I feel like reaffirmed my love for practicing, for being involved in trials, for working in high stakes environments, and especially learning new things about new technologies I didn't even know existed every day.
Very well articulated. Theo.
I graduated from college in 2023 and took about 6 months, and I started studying for the LSAT a lot. But at a certain point, I thought that I didn't want to commit to 3 years of law school and a career in law without seeing what working in the legal field actually looked like. So I started talking to college friends and family friends who worked as legal professionals, as lawyers or paralegals. And essentially all of them tried to scare me off and told me not to try to become a paralegal except for one person, and that was Bijan. And he absolutely raved about this place. So I pretty much moved to New York before even being introduced to anyone at this firm, and applied and started working here a few months later. That's how I got into this.
Well, I recall that you were out of the country when he basically keep checking with you and said that you need to return my call. We are looking for someone. So Bijan, your turn now. You tell that story much better than me. How did you get Theo into this?
One of the biggest things, and I want to say, getting Theo into this is not the greatest of phrases. I would really say, we had a call to see if we could get more paralegals, and the first person who came to mind was Theo. This is the first time I'm hearing that, other people were scaring Theo away. I think, to the end of my days, that Theo is one of the perfect people for law because of how he sort of looks at almost like any piece of evidence he sees. Theo will see the thing that I cannot, and will see the argument that's working that I am just too stubborn to not want to acknowledge. And it's kind of amazing. But the story, I will say, is in January, I'm calling Theo's roommates. I'm calling Theo. Theo, please get back to the United States. There is this wonderful opportunity. You will really love this place. And I'm so happy to this day that you answered my call.
I hope the Groombridge will give you a good commission or referral bonus for getting Theo in.
Commission, right?
No, but that's fine.
Now that you have actually Theo in the same room with you and having him on your sort of part of your crew, so I think that is referral bonus in itself.
I would definitely agree.
I think you and Theo were in the same college. And then Crystal was from University of Pennsylvania.
Penn State, that's right.
And,
yes.
Okay, sorry, it's Penn State.
I'm joking. I do to make her mad. Sorry.
Oh, he's coaching the witness here. But I know that he's a philosophy major. I really like that about him because you both are humanity and social science. But John, you're political science?
I was going to be science, but then I switched to sociology.
Sociology. So social science and humanities, and we got a STEM here. That should be interesting. What are some of the lessons that you have learned here since you started your job? And can each one of you share a non-confidential story about what made a great impression?
So maybe I should preface by saying that I had research positions when I was in college. I hadn't ever worked in a corporate environment until after I graduated. So my impressions of what it meant to be working in corporate life were very different than the reality of the situation. For instance, I was raised to kind of not be concerned about soft skills so much and study, get the best grades you can. And that's what's going to take you farthest. Read what you can, write as much as possible, all those skills. And it didn't really occur to me how important the other skills were until I started working. And maybe a story I can tell, it's not an exact story, but it happens all the time. When you're working incredibly late and you're so tired and stressed, and maybe it's not necessarily because tons of things have gone wrong. You just have a lot on your plate. You haven't slept that much, and it's inevitable in this field that you become that exhausted just sometimes. Not constant, that's the problem, but when it does happen, it's inevitable, and it's nobody's fault really, but it's easy for everybody to be on edge. And I think that I learned to kind of understand that it's important to not just put your head down and do your work, even though that might be my first inclination. It's also important to take out those 30 minutes, talk to your neighbors, talk to the people who you share your desk or your office with, the two people next to me.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. And that time that you're talking is not wasted time because you shouldn't be billing a client, but also because you're able to come back to work refreshed. And the importance of collegiality and just being able to be friends with your coworkers and have that good environment is not something I appreciated until I started working. And I think it really came to the forefront when I started working here.
So John, Theo, which one wants to go next?
I'll go last, I think.
That's so assertive.
In a similar vein, and there's a specific person who taught me a lot about this, so I'm going to mention him as well. Philip May has been a huge mentor to me. He's counsel at Groombridge. He's in the DC office. And when I came into the law firm, I was deeply terrified, one, because I didn't know any lawyers, but two, there's this idea that whenever we have projects, whenever anything happens, in my first few months, I have this inclination of like, it's got to, just like Crystal, it's got to be serious first. It's got to be everything forward. But any room that Philip comes into, he's the most detailed person I've ever met. But at the same time, he's able to bring levity into every single room he's in. There isn't a single room I've been in where Philip May has at least made one person laugh and still been on topic at the same time. And that's something that I've really appreciated about this firm, but also this field, is that being in law isn't just about making the best sort of argument. It's also about making sure that the people on your team are happy. That's something that Philip does, and it's something I want to do in the future. So you're looking for
inevitable now, Theo.
You're looking for a story about an event at this firm that's had a big impact on us. I think Crystal was talking about times when we're all working late at each other's throats. There was a point in August where I think we've been working every day. We've been in the office late, eating delivery, taking taxis home, late in the night every night. And I was on a case, and all of my tasks had to do with something called an assay, which in biopharma is like a test to see if a drug will work on a patient. And I was thinking, what does this word mean? What does this word assay mean? So I looked it up, and originally it was a term in prospecting for when you go and take some ore and test it to see how much gold it contained, how valuable, a claim was. And I had a thought, kind of an epiphany. I was like, this job is an assay, not in the biopharma sense, but in the prospecting sense. And that, I think us young paralegals are untested ore, and this job is a test to see if we have gold in us. I told my coworkers, they didn't like it, but I still think it's a profound thought.
Yeah, you almost bringing existentialism into your work every day. That's quite profound, I must say. I mean, usually, so I actually have been in the paralegal profession for almost 30 years, longer than you guys have been alive. So part of it is I've been in litigation, patent litigation, so I know exactly what you mean by the long hours. Sometimes, when we have to do in the past, when we have to do production, and I had one instance where the partner asked me, how much time do I need to give you notice if you need to come, and this is in the old days, if you need to come to on site for a document review? I said, well, I don't know, at least a weekend. Now, I have never worked with that person. I've worked with him before, but not on a production trip. He did give me notice on a Thursday, and I had to be on site in Pennsylvania on a Monday morning. And I asked him, what do I need? He was like, you figure it out. I was like, what do you mean I need to figure it out? So I figured all of this stuff out, but it was nerve-wracking. And I asked him, it's we stay in the same hotel. So I asked him, can we meet in the morning before we go to the client site? He's like, no, I'll see you there. So I was doing so much prep work in my head, trying to figure it out exactly how I'm going to do all of this stuff. But those are the moments when you are talking about whether there's any gold in you. I find out I have plenty of that in me. Between the anxiety and, and I'm a perfectionist. So those are in the old days. So I'm so grateful. I really do give him a lot of credit for basically just throwing me in there. I didn't sink or swim, because I think that in the old days, some of my mentors always told me that the legal profession is a sink or swim. But I'm really glad to hear that you all have a different experience having people guiding you. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to ask you a question. You could speak for yourself and not the entire generation. So there have been a lot of negativity about Gen Z workers wanting instant gratification. Basically they want instant result, not willing to put in the hours. Well, from just right here, I already know that you're putting in the hours. And I have experienced some of those, but I also have experienced the other side of it. And so I wonder, because obviously you're in New York, there's plenty of things to do. If you will have to be here oh my God, I have to do overtime again. So at some point, the money doesn't really matter anymore, because you just want to go home, hang out with friends, do whatever. How do you actually have that work ethics and just keep getting the job done, especially contrary to what the stereotypes of Gen Z are?
Because I've been thinking about this specifically for a very long time. I think that one of the biggest notions that you point out, Ashley, is this idea of like Gen Z doesn't want to work long hours. It's I clock in, I clock out. One of the biggest things that sort of drives me is, and I think I've seen it with a lot of people that I've worked with for different reasons, is when you find something that someone is passionate about, they will work to the end of the earth to get it done. One of the things that I have found really inspiring with this job and what keeps me going is I really love seeing a new piece of evidence and seeing how does that fit to the story or to the timeline that I've already been building in my head about this case. That's what drives me. But one thing that's really interesting, and I've spoken with our partners about this, is a lot of our older generations had this idea that it was work first. Even in your obituaries, it was someone was a doctor. They were this, they were this. But we're now seeing a trend toward, it isn't just that you're a doctor. You're also a surfer. You're also, these are your different hobbies. These are your different passions. What I'm sort of seeing is a shift toward an inside and outside of the workplace balance, where if you want to sort of see like the best in the younger generation, you need to both embrace their passions outside of the office and inside of the office.
Which we don't have. Which is outside the office.
You mean you don't have passion outside of office? What do you say that you don't have?
They're unrequited passions.
Really?
I'm gonna be honest, I've actually been getting into like Polish cinema. It's not like, I was talking to someone about this last week. The Canopy channel has slowly become my favorite place.
I've lived here for about a year. I still have been to Central Park. I've been to the Met once.
You haven't been to Central Park?
No.
Oh,
at some point.
Summer was our busiest time of year.
Unfortunately, that's true.
Like I didn't have a weekend for a few months. Like,
then when summer rolls around again, we'll find something to do.
Anyway, I mean, maybe this is more about me than Gen Z.
Hey, why not make it all about you, right? Can you I've been actually studying about personal branding a little bit, actually a lot. I just finished the whole personal branding process. What is your understanding of personal branding?
Branding?
Personal branding. What is personal branding?
So it's going to be interesting coming from, so you may know that Bijan is like the LinkedIn person, right? But there's like an interesting dichotomy that comes with me and Theo. I think we try to avoid being chronically online as much as possible. Both of us actually deleted Instagram. Neither of us use Facebook. What other ones up there?
I use Reddit sometimes. I hate to admit it. But
that's true. Okay.
Now we know that about you.
I mean, we're on LinkedIn, but I'd say I have it begrudgingly.
Right, because it's I think almost a professional requirement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta put yourself out.
Right, so you show that you're serious about the work that you do, you're proud of the work that you do. I think outside of that, though, like there's always, personal branding surely has always existed. And well, your first question or your last question was, what is personal branding? Maybe we could all give a different flavor of this. My understanding, though, it's almost like somebody else is giving an elevator pitch on you. And what is it that they're going to say right off the bat? It's not about like what you might tell people to think about yourself, but it's what impressions you leave with other people. That's my understanding. And so that concept doesn't necessarily exist, it wasn't born after the internet. It's always existed. People have always had a reputation amongst like personal gossip circles and online ones.
Their work community.
Yeah.
Industry.
My sort of take on this, though, is it is very much an elevator pitch that has always sort of existed. But it's interesting to see that with the addition of the internet, that the way in which you can show things more and more and more almost incentivizes people to do it. And it's sort of, I think we're at a point right now where there's a clash between those who are like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do the work, and that's the thing that's important. And then the other end, which is like, I need to show this to everyone, both of which have merit, I will argue. As someone who loves to boast when I've finished or done something or worked with someone on a project, it's a difference between like mindset and outreach. And I think there's definitely a balance.
Let's hear what the philosopher has to say.
Okay. I think in the past, personal branding, unless you were like in the media in front of a camera being on TV, it was out of your control. It was what other people said about you. If they liked you and liked the work that you did, they would speak well about you to their friends, potential clients and friends. If they didn't like you, they'd speak poorly about you. But with the internet and things like LinkedIn, you can kind of curate your own avatar and sell a version of yourself that you want to be sold rather than relying purely on word of mouth amongst other people. I don't think I'm very good at it. I don't know if I will be later in life, but yeah, LinkedIn scares me at the moment.
I think LinkedIn scares a lot of people because there's over 1 billion users, but only, I think, a very, very small amount of people is like 0.3% or even lower people that actually use it like regularly. So there's a huge space to grow. So Crystal used the correct definition. She used the word reputation because it is actually the digitization of reputation. And you can't really control your reputation because it lies in other people's head. But what you can do is to influence. And it's different from social media. Just because people are like putting themselves on TikTok, putting themselves on LinkedIn, which is a professional medium, putting themselves on Instagram, that is a self-expression. And that sometimes, especially the people that does it regularly, is in sort of like their way of influencing the process of how other people see them, and then hopefully to influence their reputation. So I actually recently gone through a whole personal branding process, and it was really interesting how things find out. So my company actually started in 2020. So for 5 years, I really didn't want to be seen. So I hid myself behind the BPG brand. And so there were so many things, like Theo, our philosopher here. I'm only here to work. I don't need to be seen. My mom is like old school Chinese. It's like, what? You're on social media again? And she also wants to protect me. I don't know if Crystal can relate to me in this sense. This is totally implicit bias because we're both Asian American. And then she wants to, in her own way, to protect me. So if I'm being seen, I'm out there, there might be people that can potentially harm me. I think that's the old school. That's what they're thinking. Maybe that's why Theo is scared of the LinkedIn at the moment. I don't know. But there was like very interesting like process in terms of how this whole thing, it took about 2.5 months. It took me a long time to decide that I want to go through this process. And the very first thing that I had to do is to give 7 names to my brand strategist. And he had an extensive interview with each one of the 7 people to talk about my reputation. Now, I was petrified.
That's my worst nightmare.
Like, now people have an open forum to talk about you. And some of these people knew me when I first started. That had been a very nerve-wracking process. And then I had to do 2 1.5-hour workshops with him and go through, a program called Figma. And I could not do this well. So I was like going through, and basically there's the brand of the color. There's like the words that you want to use to describe yourself. And there's a lot of things. And one thing that was really hilarious, because I was hiding behind my company brand, and I did not realize that. If you see my LinkedIn profile, it was BPG all over before, but I just changed the LinkedIn banner because I was working with my illustrator. I had some guidance in terms of like, what are my brand colors? I basically had to fill out questionnaire. And so he, from an objective point of view, after talking to all the other people, and some of them are my clients, long-term, short-term, my mentors, my brother, that was the one that I was most petrified because he doesn't speak that much. So he's like Theo, man of few words. And he also works in a very demanding field more than like litigation because he actually goes to the hospital. He's trauma equipment sales executive. So a lot of time he has to go into, pretty much every day he has to go into OR. So when my brand strategist was trying to get him to basically get that interview, he's constantly on a schedule that I cannot do it today. I'm sorry, I cannot do this today. So that particular process is why I wanted to kind of preface this. Now, we can't really, look for the other 7 people for you guys, but let's do this fun exercise. Think about Theo's reputation. What do you think is his reputation?
Theo's personal brand.
In your
That's a
opinion.
fun question. I think this is a very fun question. So if I had to describe Theo's personal brand, I think one critical part of it has to be brutal honesty, because if something doesn't make sense to Theo, or if something doesn't sit right with him, or if things just feel a little bit off, he's not afraid to voice those opinions and then try to resolve them. So like sometimes we work together where there's often overlap between a lot of the matters and cases that we're staffed on. So every so often, one of us will get a task, and just due to the nature of our caseload, we have to ask other people to help out or even take over projects. And I like to think of like describing tasks and pushing them onto Theo, if willing to take it on, requires like this Theo tax. And the Theo tax is like justifying the work to him. so if I start detailing something and I'm like, oh no, I feel it, he's about to ask, he's going to like make some comment about how this is like a terrible task, then I have to come in and immediately be like, well, this is why we need it. This is how it's going to be helpful to the rest of the team. And this is why they're going to be incredibly grateful once it's finished. And then like every single time without fail, Theo digs his heels in and then does the work. It's not like the Theo tax happens and he's like, bah humbug, like I'm still not going to do it, like Scrooge or something. But he genuinely will like be like, oh, okay, I get it now. This makes sense. Like I'm going to go forth and do it. And if it takes hours, if it's terrible, if I tell him like, I'm so sorry, I can't help you for the next like 5 hours, he'll be like, okay, it's fine. I'm going to get it done. For Theo's personal brand, maybe like that inquisitive nature mixed with the brutal honesty is something, or a way that I would characterize him.
Can I add something to that as well? I think that there are layers of definitely of everything of what Kristen said, but I think at its root, it is kindness. Specifically, what I mean by that is Theo is not the definition of kind that we know today, which is like, I love you, like very, very overbearing. Kindness comes from an understanding of the person across from you and knowing what to give when. And Theo can find the specific thing that someone needs when they sort of need it, and can find the qualities of the person across from them. And he loves and celebrates those qualities. Theo isn't going to beat around the bush. And that is how he shows his kindness. And that's how he makes it the most effective form of kindness.
Do you agree, Theo?
Excuse me?
Would you agree?
Yeah, sure.
That's the easiest way out.
I just try to avoid all kinds of self-reflection. I don't think I've looked into myself deeply enough to know if I fully agree or disagree. How about this? I agree with all the good qualities they see in me, and I disagree with all the bad qualities they see in me.
So that they actually said anything bad.
How about just honest instead of brutally honest?
I think that's candidness. I was interviewing someone, and I've learned, because I used to tiptoe a lot. When I'm uncomfortable with something, I didn't want people to not like me. I was a case manager before, and I supervise or actually lead a team, but mostly supervise because I am actually responsible for them getting the deliverable done, right? So part of it is that I'm like, oh, maybe I'll buy them pizza and get them to stay. But sometimes when there's hard conversation, I just kind of like not necessarily able to handle it. So sometimes I let it slide. And if there are work that actually needed to be done, and if there's certain people that decided that I don't want to do it, and they have like 10 million excuses why they cannot stay overtime. And then the people who have no boundaries and always say yes ended up staying with me to do OT. That's kind of how I managed. So that was my own self-reflection. And during the VPG journey, I had to kind of like learn to step out of that comfort zone. So there's a book by an author by the name Kim Scott, and it's called Radical Candor. So one time I was actually interviewing a GC of a company, and I said, oh yeah, something about radical candor. And he was like, radical candor is generally bad. What do you do? The good profession that might be, right? So I think it depends on the time and everything. So let's give Theo a chance to talk about the reputation of Bijan. This should be interesting.
Bijan is a warm ray of sunlight filtering down from the heavens, universally beloved in the office, probably biggest individual contributor to Groombridge Woo's corporate culture, puts other people before himself to a fault, selfless and kind.
How much did he pay you before this?
Well, he got me a job. So
It's where all that commission went.
If I can add to that also, like I think you described Philip earlier this way, but I couldn't agree more with you as well, that you also bring like levity to a room. And it's possible, I think, because somehow people are excited and like they almost wait on whatever it is you're going to say when you walk into a room. They're like waiting for the bit to come out or the joke or like however you like imagine to make other people laugh. But the thing about it is I feel like it could kind of paint you in a way that makes you seem like a class clown. And I don't want that to be the impression at all, because it's very purposeful. Like Bijan makes a point to think about the group dynamics before he enters these situations. So at this point, I can kind of read him maybe a little bit better than I could read the room. So there'll be times where an entire room of people are silent because I guess people have just run out of things to say. They're really tired or whatever is on their minds. And then Bijan would be like, across the room, he'll start a conversation with me that's just accessible enough that everybody can join in. And then we all start like with a new topic in mind. And he has like an incredible ability to pick the person, pick the topic, and make it work with the room. I don't have those skills, maybe yet, one day, possibly, but it's something that's, I think, incredible.
Yeah, great to connect with people. There's one story I've seen Nick Groombridge, one of the name partners, belly laugh exactly one time. And it was through a conversation with Bijan, and I was very impressed.
Well, thank you both. Like I was so waiting for like it's like, but oh my god, but that's something I need to personally work on. Is like it's really wonderful to hear that from your colleagues, but I also think like this is what makes them both so great.
So how about Crystal? Both of you
got nothing nice to say. But I do actually have a story for Crystal, and I think this works really well. The first thing I'm going to say off the bat is when it comes to any of the paralegals here, Crystal calms the associates like no one else. There have been times where, if you remember where we work in our office, that Crystal is right next to the door. People will stand right next to it and just immediately look Crystal in the eye and just like talk through something that they're doing. And Crystal will respond back, and they feel so much more calmed walking out of that room. A time in which this was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen is actually not with any of our associates, but actually with our interns, our summer interns that were here. All of them, I have a photo of it as well, kind of came around Crystal's desk, and they sort of were watching her work. And she was explaining everything she was doing step by step. Crystal's able to say things clearly and concisely and in a way that anyone can sort of understand. I think even in this interview, I think actually you've said twice now, it's like, that's the right thing to say. That's like something of like what Crystal was saying. But at the same time, I am constantly dumbfounded about the different ways Crystal can think about a thing and the compassion she shows the people around her. There is no one else I would rather spend over like 2,000 hours with than both of these people. But I think Crystal, especially Crystal. Yeah. Yeah, you're great. There are a lot of other stuff, but we're not going to talk.
There's a lot of stuff that evens the scale.
Yeah. She's a great teacher. She pretty much taught me how to do all the quantitative aspects of this job. Is that the right word? Everything technical, everything other than, going to social functions and smiling and nodding.
Well, I also taught you to read, to write.
Walk.
Right.
I couldn't feed myself.
I want to give you my impression of each one of you. Would you like to hear?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So during our prep meeting, the one that intrigued me the most was Theo, just because he was so uncomfortable.
I really was.
You were really uncomfortable, but you have grown, like for this one, for example, right? And I really applaud you for getting out of your comfort zone, because you can totally tell Bijan, I'm not doing this. I can see you do that, but I really applaud you for actually saying yes and go through with this. So thank you. I do think that you are very skeptical about a lot of things, but I think you're open-minded when it's necessary. And that's my thought about it. Crystal, well-spoken, articulated, respectful, and I can see what Bijan was saying about you keeping people calm, because that smile sets it all. When in doubt, there are a lot of people that are so nervous with deadline. It's like when that clock is ticking and you have a midnight deadline and and all people freaked out. So the ability to calm people down and also calm yourself down is so important. It's you first before others. So that's one thing that I really like. While like Bijan likes to get everybody together, I think that you sort of like the balancer of the two. That's how I see it. I don't know if it's correct. So that's kind of, besides you are the only STEM person here. So obviously all the stats and quantitative stuff goes to you. So that was my impression of you. And then Bijan. What can I say about Bijan? Only good things, actually. I was very impressed. And I see this in some of my kids too. I call them my kids. They look out for each other. And it's so refreshing. Because when I first approached it, I said, hey, would you like to do this? Because I actually don't like, I'm sort of a contrarian lately. And so before, I never really used to speak up. So I'm kind of like, okay, blending behind the scene, blending behind the company. And it's not necessary for me to speak up, And I like to observe a lot. One of the things that I found super refreshing and I really love, and I'm very touched the fact that you guys call me friends. And I have to go to New York and we have to go lunch sometime. Maybe dinner, I don't know. We'll figure out exactly when that would happen. I think that when I asked him, and he was like, do you think that I could include Crystal and Theo? Sometimes the legal world, or actually not just legal, the world, especially in some of the older generation, we're so used to, for the lack of a better word, it's very competitive and sometimes it's dog-eat-dog. And to have people that actually look out for each other, and I see that in my other team members, especially the Gen Zers, that actually look out for each other for opportunities. That's how I got to know one of my illustrators. I have someone who said, oh, do you want to do it? It almost seemed like that they're sending people to the cult. I became the cult. And so I think that I see the blend of humor, but I think that it's very, very important when Crystal said that he is not to be mistaken as a class clown, because there's more to that, and words matter. And know that he also does a lot of philanthropic work. Do you want to talk a little bit about your work? In your opinion, who is Bijan now that we have gone through almost a whole episode? In terms of like your outside interest, because you also do a lot of outside work helping other people. And I remember that you had this hot dog history for the thing for candy. So that's the one that I really remember the most. And I remember during the prep, you were so excited talking about this. So let's bring that excitement back to the room.
And I've been able to, I can say this quite a lot quicker now. Market Dog Day is the event that Ashley is referring to. And specifically what that event is. Kenyon College has a tradition that there is a hot dog known as the Market Dog. The Market Dog in the early 2000s was marketed at 50 cents, then raised up to 75, and then after the pandemic, it raised up to $1.25. I found a lot of community when it came to the Market Dog. Some of my best friends and I would all get the hot dog together. We would send photos of each other when we couldn't see each other. And
Before the pandemic, it was 50 cents.
Yes, it was
50
fantastic.
cents. It was you get like 4 of them. Sorry.
Soda. It was all for $5. Now it's
Integral part of campus culture.
integral. No, Theo was exactly correct. Should have been there first.
I'm sorry. You're right.
But after the pandemic, I really wanted to inspire people to see, like, if you want to make something on this campus, you can do it and you can make it possible. One of the things I was very passionate about was this Market Dog. So I got many campus administrators, one of which Celestino Limas, who is a mentor of mine, and Nick and Betsy Jones, who are the owners of the Village Market, all worked together to make this event possible. And we sold over 400 hot dogs in a single day. And the best part about that was simply about, it wasn't just students that came together, but it was the community that came together as well. And I can talk more about my philanthropy, I can talk about anything like that, but the main point of all of this is bringing people together. And not just that, is making at least one person laugh and one person smile, because that's really what it's all for, is to make sure that the person next to you and that person next to them is happy. And that's what's most important to me. That's Bijan.
It's important to say the Market Dog Day, what made it Market Dog Day is they temporarily for that day reduced the price back to 50 cents. So you could go in with a pocket full of quarters and come out with a meal.
That's my future lawyer right there.
Okay.
Well, actually, that's a great kind of closing for this. Do you now, having worked as a paralegal, and raise your hand if you are going to law school?
Trying, yeah.
That's all 3 of you, right? So who's going, so Theo, I think it's August, right?
August, yeah.
Yes.
NYU.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to go back to San Francisco
Yeah, I don't have to.
yet.
This lovely town.
Yes. But you're New York City, you're home.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now that you have this particular experience as a paralegal, you decided that it's time to go to law school, huh?
Yes, pretty much every person here, not pretty much, every person here who went to law school is a role model, ridiculously motivated and intelligent. I want to be more like them. I thought this might scare me off going to law school, but it just made it a sure thing. This job, that is.
Well, are you going to go full-time? You're going to go part-time? What are your thoughts?
Full-time, 3 years.
I've worked with people that jobs actually scare them away to be going to law school or be a lawyer. And so kudos to you and kudos to Groombridge for inspiring you to go into the legal profession. So I suspect that Crystal and Bijan will be right after. That's really kind of exciting. On that note, I'm going to give you one final question, and that is, if you were to give one advice, each one can be different, to someone that just graduated from undergrad and wanted to go to law school and maybe want to choose the route that maybe not quite sure what they wanted to do, what is the one advice that each one of you can offer?
I think that the one piece of advice I would give to somebody who's graduating or recently graduated is to figure out what your non-negotiable is. Like, there's a lot of people who are somewhere between having no plan and then every single detail laid out for their future. But at the end of the day, I always feel that whatever plans you have, wherever they fall on that spectrum, they're going to change. Like, life just kind of hits you and then you have to go with the flow. But you have to figure out what your non-negotiables are. Like, do you want to be surrounded by people who you enjoy working with? Do you want to be fully invested in a particular topic that matters to you? Do you want to be able to support your family while also working? There's certain things that you can find alternatives or ways around, but you'll have career decisions that you need to make and decide yes, I do want this and I can compromise on that. And if you don't know what your non-negotiables are, then you don't waste time trying to figure it out in theory. Just jump into work. And then when you start working, the experience will kind of inform you and tell you oh, this is actually not something I can live with, or this is really great. I want more of this. And you'll have a gut feeling whether you need to keep it and needs to stay in your life.
I think if you're about to graduate or recently graduated, you should take some time off, take a year or 2 or 3 and go work in a legal job. I think a lot of young people, a lot of seniors or recent graduates want to go to law school, want to be lawyers, but it's kind of nebulous why. I think I was in that position 2 years ago when I graduated. You have to have a clear reason, both for yourself and, to be honest, for your applications. If you're wishy-washy about why you want to go to law school, admissions committees will see right through that. Take time, make sure this is a field you want to work in, and get your reasons down.
I think those are both very profound pieces of advice that have helped a lot of people. And what I can add to that is simply a quote of, don't become bitter. I say this in the sense of, if you are a graduate from any school, the road to going to law school, the road to getting a job is long. It isn't something that is straightforward. It isn't something that is going to be handed to you. One of the biggest things we're seeing in the modern day is a lot of people applying to jobs and simply not getting into the places that they want to. At the same time, they're not getting to the path that they thought they were going to go 2 years ago. I say to them, don't become bitter, because the best things happen through accidents, and the happiest times happen when you can sit down and figure out what is most important to you. And laughing through and making the best of every moment is the most important thing. Find what you're passionate about, hold to that, and make sure that that thing is centered to you.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you to each one of you for going through this whole process. Also, being so patient since October, because it must be killing some of you. It's oh my God, when are we going to do this? So thank you so much.